Chris Landry, welcome back in the game at Tuscaloosa. I hope you're doing well.
I'm doing well. Merry Christmas to you and all your listeners.
Merry Christmas.
And everybody at the station.
Thank you. Merry Christmas to you. You got big plans this weekend?
It's a work week. It's going to be as normal as a normal work week with obviously early signing period today. I didn't really need that in the mix of everything going on with bowl preparations. Of course, Christmas Eve is normal NFL Sunday. Got a couple of games in the NFL on Christmas Day, and with everything going on, bowl preparations, it's going to be like any normal day for me. But that's just fine.
Chris, I want to go into some details, obviously, about early signing period, and Coach Saban kind of went off on it last week and said it's a complete mess. He didn't like it, but he said he's going to have to work with it. You talk to a lot of coaches. Is that a similar response that you're getting as well?
Yeah, and one of the things that I've never quite understood, and while I don't like it, I think the early signing period should be in August, prior to a kid's high school senior year. August 1st, before he gets started for his ball practice in his senior year, that's when he should be allowed to commit early sign, and you have it then. You wouldn't have as many signings, but for the ones that fits, that, hey, they're done with their recruiting, they don't want to get recruited anymore, which saves schools a lot of money, and they would get those guys out of the way and then focus on the rest of the recruiting class. I think putting it now, there's so many issues that goes on. You're preparing for bowl games. People are holding on to coaches to finish off this early signing period. Then there are going to be coaches scattered around that are going to leave for other jobs. You've got coaches that have made changes on their staff. Well, who's going to be your defensive coordinator? And, so if you're at Arkansas or at A&M or at Florida State, how you recruit a defensive player and try to tell them what type of defense you're going to run when you haven't hired your defensive coordinator, because you can't hire him because the guy you want to hire is on somebody else's staff that they don't want to get rid of until they get signing day done, and then he's going to be available. You see where I'm going? I mean, it becomes a complete mess. Who do you need to sign, and how many do you need to sign? How many players are going to leave early for the draft? Well, we don't know that. It's still December. We've still got bowl games. Some players haven't made their decision yet. Most of them haven't made their decision. There's a lot of unintended consequences with it. For the group of 5 programs that might benefit from getting the big schools from poaching them, well, there's some value from that standpoint. But from the prospective standpoint, if you're sitting there and you want to go to school A, but you're let's say you're a 3-star prospect, maybe a high-level 3-star prospect, that you're plentiful. There are a lot of guys like you. You might want to go to school A, but you don't have an offer just yet. They've kind of made a soft offer. Depending upon availability, we like you. You'd like to wait and see that out. You're making a decision for your next 4 years. You'd like to know where those to see if that opportunity is there. But you're going to get a school that's going to tell you that maybe a group of 5 school or a lower level Power 5 school that's going to say you sign today or you don't have an offer. So you're not that kid now that may not get the offer from the school they really want to, and then if they bypass this, that school's going to move on to someone else. Because remember, we're not talking about one of the top 150, top 300 level kids. We're talking about some of those others. So how does that kid make out? How is it good for him? And I think we often forget about those kids in the process when we're all talking about Johnny 5-star. Well, most of these guys are not that. Most of them are good players that can be developed and ought to have an opportunity to survey as long as they want to for where they want to sign. The other thing is just not good for college football. It's working in the NFL, there's a lot of problems administratively that we deal with. The one thing that's really good is you have the season, and then after the season you have a time for the beginning of the business season, the beginning of free agency. We have the combine. We have draft preparation. We have the draft. We have mini camps. Then we have training camps. We have everything is structured well. College football is a mess. We end up with the season. We end up with the conference championship games. We shut it down, and we have bowl periods, we have long delays, and then we're going to throw in a signing day right in the middle of it. I mean, you got teams preparing for bowl games, playing in bowl games. As you can tell, I'm not a big fan of it. I'm sorry to keep going on.
You sound like Coach Saban. I mean, that's what he did.
Well, it's right. It is frustrating because there's a lot of things that just don't make sense. And a lot of it is just because we don't have a system in college football. We don't have a college football commissioner. We don't have anybody. It's a bunch of people that coming together and throwing ideas out, and this sounds good. It's kind of like the playoff systems. We throw this out. We do this. There's just, until we have some uniformity and some structure where you have somebody that can oversee the good of college football and the college football calendar and how things work, I think, and I don't know how this is going to play out, Ryan. We'll see how when it's all said and done, but I think it may create greater separation between Power 5 and Group of 5, and at some point we're probably going to have to go that direction to where we're going to be Power 5 and the Group of 5 can go and do their own little thing and play for their own little trophy, and it's going to be a bigger separation. But I think all of this stuff has created mass confusion, and it's not really good for the game.
Chris, do you think we're close to that, though? I mean, is there discussions behind the scenes that at some point maybe they'll separate and have the Group of 5 and the Power 5?
Well, there's a lot of discussions, but how do you do it? Who's going to do it? I mean, it's going to have to be a little coalition to where, you know, the coaches and the administrators and the president say, yeah, let's do it. And then it's get enough people to, you know, how do you form it? How do you separate from it? That's not as easy to do. But there's a lot of interest and consideration in doing it. It's just who really does it. You know, people say, well, the NCAA is its member institution. They are, the people that decide it, or the exact people that the schools themselves. So, I think at some point that it'll get to that. I don't know how soon. I think it really depends. For example, adding another coach and doing things. Well, some things just don't fit for Group of 5 schools. Some things fit for Power 5 schools. So where are we really going? When a Group of 5 school really has no chance of getting into the national playoff picture, well, then what benefit is it? I'm a belief that those programs should be allowed to compete for something. Maybe having their own division is the way to go. If they're not going to, even if they're good, they're not going to be able to get into it. There's no chance Central Florida would ever get in. Even if they had played, let's say they had played a couple of good teams and won, they're still not in the playoffs. They're still not going to get in. So maybe they need to be in an area where they can compete, and maybe it would make the bowl season that much better to where they could have their own little system. I think that's the major college football is separating to where there's already that separation unofficially. Maybe officially we'll see some things that take place that might, make it for different considerations. Because the reality is the big-time programs can do more things. They can have more staff. They can do more things others can't. So what are we making the rules for? We're making the rules for, everyone, but everyone's not the same. And that's part of the problem is how do whatever rules you make are going to really fly in the face of certain programs depending upon which status they rate.
Chris, how eye-opening is it what Kirby Smart has done in Athens in year
Unbelievable. Unbelievable. I think they're headed on pace to have the best recruiting class in the country. Getting Brenton Cox away from Alabama, among others, just a few minutes ago before we went on the air. It's an unbelievable class. Unbelievable what they've done on the offensive line, adding another great quarterback, and they're not done. I mean, it is just a phenomenal class. It looks like, the Alabama classes that we look at and stare and say, my God, are they going to get everyone? That's what they're doing. It is certainly he's been a big part of that at Alabama in the past, but it is they're kind of running and hiding right now. I mean, now Texas, this may be the best secondary defensive back group that I've ever seen in 30 years. It is unbelievable what they're doing there. Clemson is doing an outstanding job, as is Ohio State. But what Georgia's doing and, getting Cade Mays and Brenton Cox on top of everybody else that they've gotten, getting those guys in the last hour. It's been phenomenal what they've been able to do.
Chris, understanding Nick Saban, and this is a concern that we hear, all these coaching changes eventually catch up to Nick Saban. You look at what Kirby Smart has done. Obviously, he was an elite recruiter. You look at Jeremy Pruitt. Now he's gone. You look at Mario Cristobal a couple of years ago. You look at Billy Napier. He's gone. Bo Davis is gone. Nick Saban certainly has filled the staff, but maybe not what you say elite recruiters. Even Nick Saban, does that catch up with?
Well, I still think that Alabama's recruiting at an elite level. But when you throw in now one of those guys like Kirby Smart that goes right into your own conference, and he goes to Georgia. I mean, it's not like, with all due respect, going to Mississippi State. And you're not going to recruit, at a top 5. Georgia is a place that can recruit with anybody in the country. And that program could be as good as anybody's. They have everything that anybody else could have, and they put together a staff, and Kirby's doing it like Nick did it. Well, then it's certainly going to have an effect, because now you've got somebody in your own league that's doing it. I think that, sure, it has an effect. It's welcome to the world of, if you're really good, what's going to happen? You're going to lose players early to the draft. You're going to lose staff for other people. It's why you have larger staffs. You build things in, and I think they've done a seamless job, but surely you're going to lose good people, and there's a transition. When you lose them consistently, you lose some of that continuity. And so even though they may be good, you're right, some may be a little bit better on-field coach, another guy may be a tad better recruiter. And, the continuity, but you're still looking at it. You're still looking at it as an elite class, but I know, for Alabama fans, they're saying, well, whoa. Georgia's now number one. That's where we're supposed to be in recruiting. And, in this given year, it doesn't look like that's going to be the case. I will caution everybody that it's not over. And one of the things that I think people are missing about this Alabama class is they know what they anticipate their needs are going to be and who they're going to lose. And a lot of these rankings, and I'm not what Georgia's doing is phenomenal, but a lot of these rankings are built on numbers and how many, but it's about filling needs. And I think in Alabama's case, they're being a little bit more selective with some of these guys, because when you have less numbers that you're looking, and you've got to make sure that more than any, you can't miss on these guys. So oftentimes that leads to, there's certain schools do it differently. For example, out west, USC is never ranked high. I mean, they're never ranked. They're late offers. But, in the end, they usually get their guys. And I'm very curious to see how this early signing will affect them. But in the end, don't feel sorry for Bama. They'll have one of those classes that'll be producing NFL prospects and big-time wins in the future. But is it going to be as easy? Well, listen, think about it. Georgia with Mark Richt was good. Under Kirby Smart, they're great. Under Gus Malzahn, Auburn's been inconsistent, but has been good to average to really good to pretty good. I think the conference is going to change a little bit, as when you don't have success, you make those changes to get better. And Georgia's one of them that appears to have hit the home run here. While they're not in the West, they're certainly going to be a challenger for the top players in the region, because a lot of the players that Alabama recruits, Georgia recruits, and so it's going to naturally have some effect. But I think Alabama will have their chances to compete. Don't feel sorry for them.
What advantages, when we move our way to this Alabama-Clemson game, what advantages you think favor the Crimson Tide?
I think the preparation of having the extra time to prepare for an opponent is an advantage that I would give Alabama. Clemson has as much chance to prepare for Alabama, but I think Alabama is better at preparing for an opponent, situational football. So I think that's an advantage. Now, the other advantage is due to what we've talked about in the negative effect of the injuries at the end of the year, and the chance of getting a lot of those guys healthy, although bad news about Dylan Moses, they're going to be healthier than they would have been, without this time. Now, that's not preparation, that's healing. But that's where, to me, it would come into just the preparation. Other than that, I think the advantages would be that I think Alabama has the ability to potentially be able to wear out Clemson's front. Now, I think Clemson's defensive line is probably the best they will have faced, but I don't think they're as deep as, let's say, Auburn's. So I think if they can work the perimeter passing game, work the horizontal passing game, and get them chasing a little bit, I think Alabama can run the football on them. That could be an advantage. Now, you can't talk about advantages without taking and looking at it the other way. I do think that the offensive line is going to have a really good game against this defensive line, and I think that by formation they're going to have to make some adjustments with their protections against this front. But I think that's a chance for them to be successful. I think defensively, fully healthy, they will match up in that better than, say, last year, in that you don't have a dynamic passer in Deshaun Watson, so they're going to be more run-oriented. And I like Alabama's chances, although they did not defend the run well against Mississippi State and Auburn. I think that had a lot to do with the injury. So, I think those are some things that jump out at me, and I do think an advantage could be Jalen Hurts. I think his ability running the football is going to be a huge factor in this game. I think they'll have a lot of design runs. I think they'll put a lot of that in, and I think they'll challenge Clemson's defense in a big-time way. And one of the things that they'll do is, okay, we'll handle that rush pressure by having some design runs, some quarterback draws, some bailout opportunities to run. Those are the things that I'm kind of tying to the preparation that I think will be put in that I think could have a potential success for Alabama.
We are talking right now to Chris Landry, LandryFootball.com, the report. The final few minutes here, and we'll let Chris break, and we will cook up with him hopefully next week and be able to Chris. Hey, Chris, you're down from Louisiana. We're going to New Orleans. Give us a good food recommendation. I mean, we're asking.
Oh, my goodness. I mean, I'm not a big New Orleans guy.
Okay.
But you cannot go wrong. I'm trying to think of some of the names, but one thing, and every, of course, Bama fans know that they've been there enough that the food there is tremendous, and you can't go wrong with pretty much any of those places. And of course, you got great seafood down in the Mobile area and whatnot. But if you like seafood, you just can't go wrong there. But just about everything is good in New Orleans. So it's one thing. Maybe eat light on the holidays and save some appetite to get to New Orleans way on New Year's Eve and New Year's Day.
Cajun cuisine, no doubt about it. Chris, let me go back here just for, and I worked that in, just a little food thing, but let me go back here just for this Alabama Clemson. When I look at this Alabama team, do you feel like that they've got to be, and I know you talked about offense compliment, do you think they have to have an aggressive approach more so because, now you lose another injury on the defensive side of the football. You don't know how these guys, if they're 100%, you're going to get a lot of these guys back, but do you feel like Alabama needs to be aggressive on the offensive side of the football?
Well, aggressive how? I mean, because there are different ways. I think, yes, I think you're going to have to be aggressive. Now, aggressive usually means, well, we need to let's go 5 wides and throw the football.
Sure, right. No.
Yeah, okay. All right, yeah.
But just be aggressive with not trying to be as conservative and knowing that you need to score some points.
Absolutely. There's no question about it. I do think that the higher scoring the game, more advantage to Clemson. But I do think that Alabama wants to be able, not so much as, say, the Georgia-Oklahoma game, needs to be kind of controlled. But I do think that the matchup is more similar than people think in terms of styles. I think part of it is going to be, okay, if you're going to overplay the run, because both of these defenses will, what quarterback can make more plays in the passing game? That's, to me, going to be pivotal. And so I absolutely think that Alabama has to stay out of 3rd and longs. I mean, they need to get more product. And how do you do that? Well, you got to be more productive on early downs. I think that, You've got to take some chances. But I'm telling you, I think this is going to be Jalen Hurts run fest. I mean, this guy, he is going to run it, and he's going to run it a lot. And I think it'll be with a design to keep the chains moving and wear down Clemson's front. I think they have to do what Clemson did to them last year. They wore down Alabama to where in the fourth quarter they didn't have legs. And I think that this Clemson defensive line, while it is really loaded with NFL talent, Ryan, it's not as deep. And you can get those guys running early, moving early, and if you do that, I think you can have success. And the team that does that the best and aggressively attacks with the running game, with the quarterback running, I think is going to have the most success. Now, as you overplay the run, it's going to open up the middle of the field. And I think that you're going to have to make some plays in the passing game. I expect Brett Venables to roll a safety towards Calvin Ridley's side. So it's somebody else going to have to step up. I think this is the type of game where you miss a O.J. Howard type of guy. Can somebody step up and make enough plays in the passing game? That's going to be pivotal. And I think the team that can do that the best is going to win it. And but I think absolutely you want to be aggressive. But you got to stay to who you are. And I think Clemson is a little bit more committed to the run than even in the past. But I think Alabama runs it just a little bit better in terms of how they stick to it. That's who they are. That's their DNA. But that doesn't mean you can't be aggressive within that concept. So I do think so.